When it comes to the Omega Speedmaster, there are almost as many versions of it as there are stars in the night sky. But there's one particular Speedy that I think offers an awful lot of bang for the buck, and it's packed full of amazing little design details. I think it might just be the ultimate modern moonwatch, and I recently had the chance to get hands-on with one. So guys, before we get into it, I just wanted to say a very quick thank you for all the support that the channel's getting. Thanks to you guys, I'm close to achieving my first major YouTube milestone of 1,000 subscribers. And other YouTubers have told me that when they hit 1,000 subscribers, it really started to open doors. And for me, that means the opportunity to get hands-on with more watches and create better content for you. So guys, if you're enjoying the videos, I hope you're going to hit that little red subscribe icon that's in the bottom right-hand corner. But anyway, let's get into it. So I probably don't need to tell you that the Speedmaster is almost sacred to many watch aficionados. It's almost like a religion, or dare I say, a cult. Now, I've never owned a Speedy, so I've never prayed at that particular church. But it doesn't mean to say that I don't respect and admire them. So the Speedy I want to show you today is one of my particular favourites. But it's not perfect, and I do have a few niggles with it, which I'll get into later. And aside from being a personal favourite of mine, this particular Speedy is special to me for another reason. I'll explain why at the end of the video, so stick around for that. So the Speedmaster we're looking at today is the Apollo 8, or to give it its full title, the Omega Speedmaster, Dark Side of the Moon, Apollo 8. It was released by Omega in 2018 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 8 lunar mission, which blasted off on the 21st of December 1968. This particular mission achieved a number of firsts. It was actually the first manned use of the Saturn V rocket, which went on to propel all of the other Apollo missions into space. It was also the first manned mission to ever leave the Earth's orbit, and to get into lunar orbit, the crew had to perform a very precisely timed burn of exactly 4 minutes and 7 seconds. They later described it as the longest 4 minutes of their lives. If they'd got it wrong, the command module could have been smashed into the moon's surface or have been flung off into outer space. Now, I'm sure that Omega would like us to believe that the crew used their trusty NASA-issued Speedmasters to time that burn. But it's worth noting that most of the timing instruments on board the Apollo command modules were actually made by Bulova Akitron. And so there's every chance that NASA has got Bulova to thank for getting those astronauts safely and successfully into lunar orbit. Apollo 8 orbited the moon 10 times in 20 hours, and its crew were the first humans to see the dark side of the moon, and it made its first pass behind the moon on Christmas Eve, 1968. Now, Christmas can always produce a few stressful moments, but for the crew of Apollo 8 and for those back at Mission Control, it was a pretty tense time as the command module disappeared around the back of the moon and all communications were lost until it eventually re-emerged. Now, the crew of Apollo 8 brought back a great Christmas gift for all of mankind, in the form of the first ever photograph of Earthrise, that now iconic image of the Earth, the blue marble, rising above the moon's surface. So that's a pretty cool story, and this is a pretty cool watch. So you've got a 44.25mm black ceramic case, which is brushed on the sides and polished on the top and on the lugs. Now, with those dimensions, it probably sounds like this is going to be a big bruiser of a watch, but the lug-to-lug measurement is only just over 49mm, and that black finish tends to have a shrinking effect. So this one wears a little bit smaller than those dimensions might suggest, and I can just about get away with it even on my skinny 6¼ inch wrists, as you'll see in a moment. One of the real standout features of this watch, and there are a few, is the partial skeletonization of the dial. You've got these areas which are laser-ablated, which is basically a fancy word for etched, to resemble the moon's surface. So they've got all these tiny craters on them. It's actually really detailed, and when you see it under a macro lens or a loupe, I think it just looks great. It's really subtle until you see it up close, but I think Omega have done a fantastic job. The indices and the subdials look like they're almost suspended. So you've got a running seconds subdial at the 9 o'clock position. There's a 30-minute counter at 3 o'clock, and a 12-hour counter at 6. To contrast the black, you've got yellow accents, with the chronograph seconds hand, and the hands on 2 of the subdials in yellow, as well as yellow dots at the end of the baton indices, and yellow stitching on the black leather strap. Yellow was an interesting choice of colour by Omega, as it gives this watch more than a passing resemblance to the Speedmaster Racing, which was released in 2012. I'll come back to the colour in a minute because it's one of the few little niggles that I've got with this watch. Of course, the other standout feature of this watch is the caseback, and I love how Omega have made it just as interesting to look at as the dial. And through that exhibition caseback, you can see Omega's caliber 1869, which is a manual wind movement with a power reserve of 48 hours. This movement was developed by Omega specifically for the Apollo 8, and it's only used on this model. And while you might be thinking that developing a new movement for one special edition watch is going to be a big investment on Omega's part, the reality is it's based heavily on the 1861, and that's the one that until recently was used in the standard moonwatch. The main difference is the decorated bridge plates that are laser ablated to resemble a moon surface, just like the dial. And of course, the caliber 1861, and in turn this movement, is based on the caliber 861. That was the Lamania-based movement that replaced the original caliber 321 that was used in the Speedmasters that went to the moon. Engraved around the caseback, you've got dark side of the moon to denote the series that this watch belongs to, the date of the Apollo 8 mission, and the immortal words spoken by the pilot of Apollo 8, Jim Lovell, to mission control, as the command module was about to pass behind the moon for the very first time. We'll see you on the other side. Because of its ceramic case, this watch is only available on a leather strap, and you've got a layer of yellow leather sandwiched between 2 layers of black leather, and perforated so you get to see the yellow through the holes. It's fastened with a conventional pin buckle, but this one's also made from highly polished black ceramic to match the case. For me, this is almost the perfect Speedmaster. I love the moonwatch, and if I was to buy a Speedy, I'd want one that had all those little design details, like the cratering on the dial, to remind me each and every time I looked at it that this is a really special watch, and based on something that went to the moon and back. The caseback on this watch is an absolute work of art. I love all the little details, I love being able to see that incredible manual wind movement, and I think if I actually owned this watch, it would spend just as much time sitting on my desk so that I could see that mesmerizing movement as it would do strapped to my wrist. So I did say that this is almost my perfect Speedmaster. So what about those little niggles? Well, for starters, there's that 44.25mm case size. Now this watch uses a movement that's based on the 1861, the one that until recently, when it was replaced by the 3861, was used in the standard moonwatch, and that had a case size of 42mm. So why can't this one be the same size? Even though this watch wears smaller than its dimensions would suggest, 42mm would work perfectly on my 6¼ inch wrists. Then there's those bright yellow coloured accents. Now, black and yellow really help to give this watch a sporty look, but I don't know whether actually it affects your ability to tell the time. What I mean by that is, if you look at the dial, you've got that quite broad yellow chronograph seconds hand, whereas the hour and minutes hand are in a gunmetal polished effect with a very thin white infill. And the yellow seconds hand stands out so much more that you've really got to look for the hour and minutes hand. It's very difficult to tell the time on this watch, just at a glance. Instead of using yellow, if the indices in the handset were in something like rose gold, or maybe the Sedna gold from the grey side of the moon coaxial chronometer, I think this watch would be just about perfect. That pin buckle is another minor gripe. So a black ceramic deployant clasp is available for this watch, but in order to fit it, you've also got to replace the strap, and all in all, that'll cost about £500. Now this watch in the UK has a retail price of around £8,500, or about $10,500, and I think for that amount of money, you really should get the deployant clasp as standard. Now my final gripe has got to be the box, and while this one comes in a nicely finished piano black wooden box, it's not nearly as impressive or as interesting as a box that, until recently at least, the standard manual line moonwatch, the one with the caliber 1863 or the 1861, came in, which also included a commemorative coin and a loop. It seems like packaging is one area where Omega has decided to cut back a little bit in recent years. And when it comes to the moonwatch, its most iconic piece, I think that's a real shame. I know the box usually gets put in a cupboard or stored in the attic, but if I'm buying a moonwatch, I still want that moment of surprise and delight when I first open it that the original box was designed to provide. So why is this particular Speedmaster a special one to me? Well, it actually belongs to my brother. He went out one day to buy a moonwatch, and I might have talked him into buying this one instead. Not only because I knew he'd be kind enough to lend it to me to review on the channel. Thanks, Chris. Thankfully, he's very pleased with this watch. And I guess all I need to do now is think about which model I might want to review on the channel next, and see if I can persuade him to go out and buy that one too. So while this is one of my favourite Speedmasters, I'd love to know what you think about it in the comments. Or if there's another reference that's your favourite, tell me which one and why. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, because likes really help the channel to grow. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please click that subscribe button and help me reach my target of 1,000 subscribers. Guys, as ever, thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye for now.